The check fluttered onto the cold Italian marble table, a rectangular guillotine blade severing 3 years of intimacy. $50 million. The ink was still wet, the signature sharp and aggressive. Dylan Sterling's signature always looked like he was carving his name into the world, rather than writing it. "It's a clean break, Elena," Dylan said, his voice devoid of the warmth that used to greet her in the mornings. He stood by the floor-to-ceiling window, staring out at the rain-slicked skyline of the city. He didn't even have the decency to look at her. "It's generous. It's more than you'd get in a settlement if we had actually married." Elena stood frozen in the center of the living room, a space that suddenly felt like a museum she was being evicted from. Her fingers curled inside the pocket of her silk blazer, brushing against the hard plastic casing of a pregnancy test. It was still warm from her hands. Just an hour ago, those 2 pink lines had been a miracle, a terrifying, beautiful secret she planned to share over the vintage wine breathing on the counter. Now it was just a secret, a heavy, suffocating secret. "Is it Sophia?" Elena asked, her voice steady. She didn't sound like a woman whose heart was being put through a paper shredder. She sounded like a CEO closing a failed merger. Dylan finally turned. He was devastatingly handsome, with that old money jawline and eyes the color of a stormy Atlantic Ocean. Eyes that currently held a mix of pity and impatience. "Her divorce was finalized this morning. She called me. She needs me, Elena. You know the history. You always knew." "Ah, yes, the history. Sophia, the ethereal debutante, the one who got away, the woman who had married a European count while Dylan was building his empire." Elena had just been the placeholder, the sensible, warm, loving woman who kept his bed warm and his life organized while he waited for his princess to become single again. "So, I'm being laid off," Elena said, a dry, humorless laugh escaping her lips. "To make room for the original management." Dylan frowned, adjusting his cufflinks. "Don't make this ugly. I care about you, Elena. I want you to be set for life. 50 million is freedom. You can go anywhere, do anything. Buy a vineyard in Napa. Open that gallery you always talked about." He spoke of her future as if it were a consolation prize he had picked up at a duty free shop. He had no idea that her future was currently dividing cells inside her body. Elena looked at the man she had loved with every fiber of her being. She looked at the arrogance in his stance, the certainty that he could simply buy his way out of guilt. If she told him now, if she pulled out that plastic stick, he would stay. She knew he would. The Sterling legacy demanded an heir. He would marry her out of duty, and she would spend the rest of her life trapped in a loveless marriage, watching him pine for Sophia while he resented the child that trapped him. A sudden, fierce clarity washed over her, hot and electric. She wasn't a trap, and her child wasn't a bargaining chip. Elena walked over to the table. She didn't tremble. She picked up the check. It was lighter than she expected for the weight it carried. "You are right, Dylan," she said softly, tucking the check into her pocket right next to the pregnancy test. The paper brushed against the plastic father and child, separated by a layer of denim and a universe of heartbreak. "Sophia needs you. And I certainly don't need a man who needs to be needed by someone else." Most women would immediately weaponize that pregnancy test. Elena didn't. She recognized a brutal truth. Trapping a man with a child doesn't secure a family. It merely secures a warden. She took the 50 million not out of greed, but as an exit tax. Why beg for a reluctant husband when you can legally fund your own independence? She saw his golden cage and opted to cash out. Instead, brilliant. Dylan blinked, clearly thrown off balance. He had prepared for tears, for screaming, for the throwing of vases. He hadn't prepared for a business transaction. "So we're good?" "We're done," Elena corrected. She didn't ask for time to pack. She didn't ask for a final hug. She simply turned around and walked toward the private elevator. "Elena, wait," Dylan called out, confusion finally cracking his composure. "Your things, the clothes, the jewelry. You can send movers next week. Keep them," she said, pressing the call button. The doors slid open with a soft chime. "Give them to Goodwill, or give them to Sophia." "I don't care." She stepped into the elevator, the metal doors reflecting her own image back at her, pale, wide-eyed, but standing tall. As the doors began to close, she saw Dylan take a step forward, his hand half raised, as if realizing too late that the silence in the room wasn't peace. It was the vacuum of space left after a star collapses. The elevator dropped, taking her stomach with it, down, down, down to the lobby. Elena walked out of the building and into the biting cold of the city rain. She didn't hail a cab immediately. She walked to the corner, where a heavy metal trash can stood. She looked down at her left hand. The diamond engagement ring, a family heirloom from the Sterling vault, glittered under the streetlights, mocking her. It was cold, heavy, and sharp. She slid it off her finger. It felt like shedding a layer of skin. Without a second of hesitation, she dropped the ring into the trash. It didn't even make a sound as it landed on a pile of wet newspapers and discarded coffee cups. She hailed a taxi, the yellow lights blurring through the downpour. "JFK Airport," she told the driver, her hand resting protectively over her lower stomach. "International Terminal, and hurry." She had $50 million, a broken heart, and a secret that would change the world. Dylan Sterling thought he had bought his freedom, but he had just paid for his own destruction. The silence in the Sterling penthouse was not peaceful. It was predatory. Dylan Sterling poured himself a glass of amber scotch, expecting the front door to open. He expected the click of Elena's heels, the soft rustle of her coat, the inevitable, tearful re-entry. People didn't just walk away from Dylan Sterling. They certainly didn't walk away from $50 million without a final scene. He checked his watch, 2 hours. She was probably at a hotel, cooling off. She would call her mother, cry for a bit, and then realize she had forgotten her charger or her favorite cashmere throw. But the phone on the marble island remained black and silent. The next morning, the sun rose over the city with a brutal, indifferent brightness. Dylan woke up reaching for the warm space next to him, his hand meeting only cold, high-thread, Count Egyptian cotton. The emptiness of the bed hit him with a physical thud. He shook it off. This was what he wanted, wasn't it? He was free. He had cleared the decks for Sophia. Speaking of the devil, Sophia arrived by noon, a whirlwind of designer luggage and nervous energy. She looked fragile, beautiful, and demanding. "Oh, Dylan," she sighed, collapsing onto the sofa Elena had picked out 3 months ago. "The paparazzi are everywhere. It's a nightmare. I need a spa day immediately. And this place, it feels so dark. We need to redecorate. Get rid of everything." Dylan watched her, a strange friction grating against his nerves. Elena had loved this room. She had filled it with books and soft lighting, turning his glass and steel cage into a sanctuary. Sophia wanted to turn it into a showroom. "We can discuss renovations later," Dylan said, his voice sharper than intended. "I need to head to the office." "But I just got here," Sophia pouted. It was a look that used to charm him when they were 22. At 32, it just looked exhausting. Dylan escaped to his office, but the sanctuary of work offered no relief. He found himself checking his personal cell phone every 10 minutes. No texts, no missed calls, no angry voicemails. By day 3, the silence had morphed from annoying to ominous. He needed a file, a tax document for the charitable foundation Elena had managed for him. It was a trivial excuse, but it was enough. He pulled up her contact info, his thumb hovering over the call button. He prepared his opening line, a mix of professional detachment and magnanimous concern. "Elena, I hope you're settling in. I just need the password for the drive." He pressed call. The line didn't ring. There was no pause, no moment of connection, just the flat, computerized finality of a recording. "We're sorry. The number you have dialed is not in service. Please check the number and try your call again." Dylan frowned, pulling the phone away from his ear as if it had burned him. He tried again, same recording. A cold prickle of unease started at the base of his neck. He dialed her parents' home in Connecticut. Elena was close to her mother. Surely she was there, crying over pot roast. "Hello?" Elena's mother answered, sounding cheerful. "Martha, it's Dylan," he said, forcing charm into his tone. "Is Elena there? I've been trying to reach her." A pause. "Elena, no, dear. She told us she was going on a retreat. Something about finding her center in the mountains. No reception for a few weeks. Is everything all right?" She sounded quite happy when she emailed. She lied, Elena. The woman who couldn't tell a lie without blushing had lied to her mother effortlessly. No reception. It was a calculated, seamless cover story. Dylan hung up, the unease turning into a knot of anger. She was playing games. That was it. She was trying to make him worry. He logged into the joint bank account they had used for household expenses, intending to see where she had used her card. A hotel in the city? A flight to Paris? The screen loaded balance. $0. She hadn't just taken her half. She had closed the account. But it wasn't the household petty cash that stopped his heart. It was the notification from his private wealth manager that popped up on his secure server. Transaction alert, check number 4092 processed. He clicked on the details, expecting to see a deposit into a standard savings account at Chase or Citibank. Somewhere he could trace, somewhere he could reach out and touch. Instead, the funds had been routed through a complex series of transfers, first to a holding company in Delaware, then immediately wired to an international trust with strict privacy laws. It was the financial equivalent of a ghost. The money was gone, washed clean of any connection to him or her previous identity. Dylan sat back in his leather chair, the leather creaking in the silent office. He looked around the room. There were no photos of her here. She had never insisted on marking her territory. She had simply existed in the spaces he allowed her to fill. And now that she was gone, he realized she hadn't left a single footprint. He drove home that night with a sense of urgency he couldn't explain. He stormed into the master bedroom and threw open the walk-in closet. His side was full. Her side was undisturbed. That was the horror. It wasn't empty. It was full. Her winter coats, her evening gowns, her shoes, they were all there. She hadn't packed. She hadn't taken the Birkin bags he bought her or the diamond tennis bracelet. He opened the drawers. Her passport was gone. Her birth certificate was gone. Her social security card was gone. She hadn't taken her things. She had realized that the expensive clothes and the jewelry weren't her things. They were costumes she wore for the role of Dylan Sterling's fiancée, and since the show was canceled, she had left the costumes in the dressing room. Erasing yourself is the ultimate luxury. Dylan assumed Elena's identity was tied to his credit limit. By leaving the Birkins and the diamonds, she made a devastating statement. Those weren't gifts, they were props. The moment the contract ended, she simply returned the wardrobe. True power isn't throwing a tantrum and packing the designer bags. It's walking away clean, leaving him to choke on the pristine, silent void you left behind. She had taken only herself. Dylan sank onto the edge of the bed, clutching a silk scarf she had left draped over a chair. It still smelled like her, jasmine, and rain. For the first time, the magnitude of what had happened crashed into him. This wasn't a breakup. Breakups involved negotiations, returning hoodies, an awkward run-ins at coffee shops. This was an erasure. Elena hadn't just left him. She had fired him from her life without severance. Somewhere out there in the world, she was starting over with $50 million and a blank slate. And Dylan Sterling, the man who controlled markets and moved industries, didn't have the slightest clue where she was. He was alone in the penthouse with the love of his life, Sophia, who was currently in the other room, complaining about the thread count of the sheets. And all Dylan could hear was the deafening echo of a door closing that he hadn't even realized was the exit. 4 months later, the coast. The air here didn't bite, it embraced. It smelled of salt, blooming magnolia, and slow roasted coffee. Elena sat on the porch of her rented cottage, a charming white clapboard house nestled between dunes and ancient oak trees, dripping with Spanish moss. She took a deep breath, letting the warm, humid air fill her lungs. Her hand rested on the swell of her belly, which was now undeniable. At 5 months, she wasn't just showing, she was blooming. "Kick again, little one," she whispered, feeling the flutter against her palm. "Tell me you like the ocean." Life on the coast was the antithesis of the city here. Nobody cared about the NASDAQ or the Met Gala. They cared about the tides, the shrimp catch, and whose pecan pie won the county fair. Elena had introduced herself simply as Ellie, a freelance graphic designer looking for quiet. Her $50 million sat safely in a blind trust, paying her rent and medical bills through layers of anonymity so dense, not even Dylan's lawyers could pierce them. She wasn't lonely. She had Liam. Liam was the owner of The Anchor, the local bookstore/cafe, where Elena spent her mornings. He was nothing like Dylan. Dylan was sharp angles and cold steel. Liam was worn flannel, sawdust, and warm smiles. He had broad shoulders from fixing his own roof and eyes that crinkled when he laughed. Decaf latte with oat milk, extra foam. Liam's voice broke her reverie as he walked up the porch steps, holding 2 paper cups. "And I brought you a cinnamon roll because I know the baby has a sweet tooth." Elena smiled, taking the cup. "You are spoiling us, Liam. I am going to be the size of a house by August." "You look beautiful, Ellie," Liam said simply, sitting on the swing opposite her. There was no artifice in his voice, no hidden agenda. He knew she was pregnant, single, and running from something, but he never pushed. He just stood guard. Meanwhile, 1,000 miles north, Dylan Sterling was rotting from the inside out. The penthouse was technically perfect. Sophia had redecorated, replacing Elena's warm neutrals with stark, modern whites and metallic accents. It looked like an operating room. "Dylan, are you listening to me?" Sophia's voice was a high-pitched drill. She was holding up 2 fabric swatches, dove gray or oyster white for the curtains. "Does it matter?" Dylan snapped, not looking up from his tablet. "They look the same." Sophia threw the swatches down. "You've been distant for months, ever since she left. You're obsessed, Dylan. It's creepy. She took the money and ran. Why do you care?" Why did he care? Why did he care? That was the question haunting him at 3 a.m. He cared because the silence was getting louder. He cared because every time he opened a drawer and didn't see her handwriting on a sticky note, he felt a phantom limb pain. He had hired a private investigator 3 months ago. Not just any pie, but a former CIA operative who charged 5 figures a week. Mr. Sterling, the Pie's voice came through the phone, crisp and professional. We found a thread. Dylan stood up so fast his chair knocked over. He walked into the hallway to avoid Sophia's prying ears. Where? It wasn't easy. She didn't use her passport. She took a domestic flight under a typo and airline error, on a ticket booked with a prepaid debit card. Elena instead of Elena. It matched a woman fitting her description, landing in Charleston 4 months ago. Charleston, the South. Elena hated humidity. She hated bugs. It made no sense. We tracked a digital footprint, the Pie continued. A dummy corporation renting a cottage on the coast, about an hour south of the city. The lease is under a shell company, but the IP address used to sign the digital contract traces back to a local library. And Mr. Sterling, there's something else. What? Dylan demanded, his grip tightening on the phone. We pulled some security footage from a local grocery store near that library just to confirm the ID. A ping, a photo landed in Dylan's inbox. He opened it. The image was grainy, black and white security cam footage. But it was her, Elena. She was wearing a loose sundress, her hair tied up in a messy bun, laughing at something a cashier said. She looked softer, rounder. She looked happy, happier than she had ever looked in the penthouse. But Dylan's eyes dropped lower. The dress was loose, but the wind was pressing the fabric against her body. There was a curve, a distinct, undeniable curve to her abdomen. The phone slipped from Dylan's fingers, clattering onto the hardwood floor. The sound was deafening in the sterile white hallway. He did the math. The breakup was 4 months ago. The curve looked to be about 5 months along. The air left his lungs. The world tilted on its axis. She hadn't just left. She hadn't just run away with his money. She had run away with his child rage, hot and blinding, surged through him, instantly vaporizing the lingering melancholy. How dare she? How dare she steal his heir? How dare she make a unilateral decision about his legacy? He didn't go back into the living room to tell Sophia he was leaving. He walked straight to the elevator, punched the button for the garage, and dialed his pilot. "Fuel the jet," Dylan growled, his voice trembling with a terrifying mix of fury and fear. "We're going to South Carolina now." Back on the coast, the sun was setting, painting the sky in strokes of violet and gold. Elena finished her cinnamon roll, licking the icing from her thumb. "I have a bad feeling, Liam," she murmured, a sudden chill raising goosebumps on her arms despite the heat. "It is just the wind changing, Ellie," Liam assured her, though he looked toward the horizon with a frown. Down the quiet tree-lined street, a car turned the corner. It wasn't the usual pickup truck or rusty sedan. It was a sleek black luxury SUV with tinted windows and out of state plates. It moved slowly, like a predator stalking through tall grass. It rolled past Elena's cottage, slowing down just enough for the passenger to get a clear view of the porch. Through the tinted glass, gray eyes locked onto the pregnant woman sitting in the golden light. The hunt was over. The war was about to begin. The bell above the door of the anchor chimed, a cheerful sound that usually signaled the arrival of a regular wanting a dark roast. But today, the sound felt sharp, like a warning shot. Elena was nestled in the back corner, a book on prenatal yoga resting on her bump. She felt safe here. The smell of old paper and coffee grounds was a fortress. She reached for her tea, smiling as Liam walked over to refill her water. "Hey," Liam said softly, "there's a guy out front. He's been staring at the window for 5 minutes. Looks like he bought the suit, not rented it." Elena's heart skipped a beat, then slammed against her ribs. "What does he look like?" "Tall, dark hair. Looks like he's about to fire someone." before she could answer. The door opened again. The air in the cozy shop shifted instantly. The warmth was sucked out, replaced by the static charge of a brewing storm. Dylan Sterling walked in. He looked out of place among the paperback racks and local honey jars. He was wearing a charcoal suit that cost more than the building, his face a mask of controlled devastation. He scanned the room, his eyes dissecting the space until they landed on her. Elena didn't scream, she didn't run. She simply froze, her hand instinctively covering her belly in a gesture as old as time. Dylan walked toward her. His steps were heavy, deliberate. He stopped 3 feet away, his gaze dropping from her pale face to the swollen mound of her stomach. He stared at it for a long time, his expression unreadable, a mix of wonder, horror, and incandescent rage. "You," he whispered, the words scraping out of his throat. "You took him." "I left," Elena corrected, her voice trembling but clear. She struggled to stand. Her center of gravity shifted. Liam was instantly at her side, offering an arm for support. Dylan's eyes snapped to Liam's hand on her elbow, narrowing dangerously. "Get your hands off her!" Dylan snarled. "I think you need to leave, sir," Liam said calmly, stepping between them. He was an inch shorter than Dylan, but broader, grounded like an oak tree against Dylan's hurricane. "This is none of your business," Dylan spat, then looked back at Elena. 5 months you were pregnant that night. When I gave you the check, you knew." "Yes," Elena said, "I knew." "And you didn't tell me. You let me believe you were just greedy. You let me think I was paying you off." His voice rose, cracking the library. "Quiet of the store. That is my child, Elena, my blood." "You stole him." "I stole nothing." Elena's voice rose to meet his, fueled by 4 months of suppressed anger. "You bought your freedom, Dylan. You paid $50 million to be rid of me, to clear the way for Sophia. You didn't want a family. You wanted a clean slate. Well, congratulations. You got it." "I didn't know," Dylan roared, stepping closer, invading her space. "If I had known, if you had known." "What?" Elena laughed, a harsh sound. "You would have kept me in a golden cage. You would have married me out of duty while sleeping in the guest room." "I saved us both, Dylan. I saved this child from growing up watching his father look at his mother with regret." "I am taking you back," Dylan declared, his tone shifting from argument to command. It was the voice he used in boardrooms. "The jet is waiting. You are coming with me to New York. We have the best doctors there. We will sort this out." "No, Elena, I am not going anywhere with you. You don't have a choice. You are carrying a sterling heir. I will get a court order. I will freeze your assets. I will burn this little town to the ground if I have to." He reached out, grabbing her wrist. "Let go of her," Liam shouted, shoving Dylan back. Dylan stumbled, his face twisting in fury. He lunged at Liam's stop. Elena screamed, but the stress was too much. A sharp, searing pain tore through her abdomen, unlike anything she had felt before. It wasn't a kick. It was a vice grip tightening around her uterus. Elena gasped, her legs giving way. "Liam." The color drained from her face as she clutched her stomach, doubling over. A warm wetness spread between her legs. The room went silent. Dylan froze mid-step, his rage instantly replaced by terror as he saw Elena collapse into Liam's arms. "Elena," Dylan's voice was small, shaking. "Call 911. Liam yelled at the barista, lowering Elena gently to the floor. "She is bleeding." Dylan stood there, paralyzed. He watched the woman he had discarded, the woman carrying his future, writhing in pain on the dusty floor of a bookstore. He saw the blood staining her light summer dress. He had come to conquer, to reclaim, to control. Instead, he had just triggered the one thing his money couldn't fix. "Dylan," Elena gasped, looking up at him through tears of pain. "If anything happens to this baby, I will kill you." The sirens wailed in the distance, getting louder, coming for them. But to Dylan, they sounded like a funeral dirge for the life he thought he controlled. The ambulance ride was a blur of red lights and panicked voices. Dylan, in his $5,000 suit, was relegated to following behind in his rented SUV, gripping the steering wheel until his knuckles turned white. He wasn't allowed in the ambulance. That right belonged to family. And in that moment of chaos, Liam, the man holding Elena's hand, had looked more like family than Dylan ever had. At the hospital, the air smelled of antiseptic and fear. Dylan paced the waiting room, his reflection in the glass doors mocking him. He was Dylan Sterling. He could buy this hospital, he could fly in specialists from Switzerland, but he couldn't walk through those double doors. "Mr. Sterling?" He turned. It wasn't a doctor, it was Sophia. She stood there in a white Chanel dress, looking impeccable and utterly incongruous. She had tracked his jet. Of course she had! "Dylan, this is ridiculous," she hissed, grabbing his arm. "I flew all the way down here. The pilot told me everything. She's pregnant. Really, is that why you ran off? It's probably not even yours. She's been living here for months, shacking up with some local yokel." "Shut up," Dylan said. His voice was low, deadly quiet. Sophia blinked, stunned. "Excuse me," I said. "Shut up, Sophia." He looked at her, really looked at her. For the first time in years, he saw the shallowness in her eyes, the selfish tilt of her mouth. He remembered Elena alone in that bookstore, defending her child with the ferocity of a lioness. He remembered Elena's quiet grace, her warmth, the way she made him feel human. And he realized, with a sickening jolt, that he had traded a diamond for a piece of glass. "Jet out," Dylan said. "Dylan, you're upset. We can." "Get out," he roared, startling a nurse at the desk. "Go back to New York. Go back to your parties and your empty life. We are done. Do you understand?" "Done." Sophia stared at him, mouth agape, then turned on her heel and stormed out, her heels clicking a staccato rhythm of indignation. Dylan sank into a plastic chair, putting his head in his hands. He was alone, truly alone. Hours passed. The sun went down. Liam came out once, looking exhausted, his shirt stained with dried blood. He looked at Dylan with pure contempt. "She's asking for you," Liam lied. Or maybe he didn't. Maybe he just wanted Dylan to see the wreckage. Dylan stood up, his legs shaking. "Is the baby alive?" "Early, but alive, a boy." A boy. Dylan felt a sob catch in his throat. He had a son. He followed Liam down the hallway. It felt like walking to the gallows. He reached the door to the recovery room. He raised his hand to knock, but the door opened. A doctor stepped out, blocking his path. He looked tired and stern. "Mr. Sterling?" "Yes, I want to see my son. I want to see Elena." The doctor looked at him over the rim of his glasses. "I am afraid I can't allow that." "What? I'm the father." "Miss Elena has been very clear," the doctor said, his voice devoid of sympathy. "She has requested no visitors, specifically, no Dylan Sterling. Security has been notified. You can't do this. I have rights. She is the patient. She is the mother. And right now, her blood pressure is dangerously high. Seeing you could cause a stroke. Do you want to kill her, Mr. Sterling? Because you almost did." The words hit Dylan like a physical blow. "You almost did." He stepped back, defeated. Through the small rectangular window in the door, he caught a glimpse. Elena was lying in the bed, pale and hooked up to monitors. In her arms was a tiny bundle wrapped in a blue blanket. She was looking down at the baby with an expression of pure, unadulterated love, a love so bright it hurt to look at. Liam walked into the room. He didn't touch her, didn't kiss her. He just pulled a chair up to the bedside and sat guard. Elena looked up at him and smiled. A weak, tired, genuine smile. The door clicked shut, severing the view. Dylan stood in the hallway, surrounded by the hum of machinery and the distant cry of a newborn. He had $50 million in the bank. He had a private jet waiting on the tarmac. He had an empire. But on the other side of that door was the only thing that mattered, and he was on the wrong side. He slid down the wall, sitting on the cold linoleum floor, heedless of his suit, heedless of his dignity. He buried his face in his hands and wept, the sound ugly and raw, echoing in the empty corridor. The hospital corridor was quiet, the kind of heavy quiet that follows a storm. Dylan Sterling hadn't moved from the floor for an hour. His immaculate suit was wrinkled, his tie loosened, a 5 o'clock shadow darkening his jaw. He looked like a king who had lost his kingdom in a dice game. The door finally opened, not a crack, but fully. Elena stood there. She was in a wheelchair pushed by a nurse, but her posture was upright, regal. She wore a simple cotton robe, her hair loose around her shoulders. In her lap lay the bundle. His son, Dylan, scrambled to his feet, his heart hammering against his ribs like a trapped bird. Elena. She looked at him. Her eyes were clear, dry, and terrifyingly calm. There was no hate in them anymore. Hate implies passion. Hate implies connection. Her eyes held only the polite distance one gives a stranger. His name is Jared, she said softly. Jared, Dylan breathed, stepping forward, his hand reaching out instinctively. Can I hold him? Elena didn't pull away, but she didn't offer the child either. She simply looked down at the sleeping infant. No, Dylan. Elena, please. I know I messed up. I know I was a fool. But let me fix this. I'll do anything. We can get married. I'll sign whatever prenup you want. I'll give you half the company. Just come home. Home. Elena repeated the word as if tasting it. She looked around the sterile hospital hallway, then out the window where the palms of the coast swayed in the moonlight. This is my home with Jared. He needs a father, Dylan pleaded, desperation making his voice crack. He needs the best schools, the best life. You can't deny him his birthright because you are angry with me. I am not angry, Elena said, and the truth of it chilled him to the bone. I am relieved. Do you remember the check, Dylan? The $50 million? I'll tear it up. I don't care about the money. I kept it, she continued, ignoring his outburst. And do you know what that money bought you? It didn't buy you freedom. It bought me freedom. It bought Jared's safety. It was a transaction. Dylan, you set the price for your fatherhood. You valued your past with Sophia at $50 million, and you valued us at 0. I didn't know about him. It wouldn't have mattered, she said simply. Because you would have treated him like an acquisition, like an heir, not like a son. She signaled to the nurse, who began to wheel her toward the elevator. Liam appeared from the waiting room, falling into step beside her, carrying the diaper bag. He didn't look at Dylan. He just put a protective hand on the back of the wheelchair. Elena, Dylan shouted, chasing after them. You can't just leave. I love you. Elena stopped the wheelchair. She turned her head, looking at him one last time. It was the look of someone closing a book they had finished reading long ago. You don't love me, Dylan, she said softly. You just hate losing, and for the first time in your life, you've lost something you can't buy back. Let's diagnose Dylan's sudden romantic epiphany. He didn't fly south out of devotion. He flew down because his inventory was missing. Men like Dylan consistently confuse love with ownership. He only wanted Elena back when he realized she had successfully downgraded his legacy. Elena diagnosing his ego right to his face as clinical perfection. She didn't grant him a redemption arc. She simply handed him the precise receipt for his arrogance. She turned forward. "Let's go home, Liam." The elevator doors opened. They wheeled inside. Dylan ran to the doors, jamming his hand in the gap. But the sensors didn't trigger. The metal doors slid shut, sealing them away. He saw Elena looking down at Jared, whispering something, her face glowing with a peace he had never been able to give her. The numbers above the elevator ticked down. 321 G gone. Dylan Sterling stood alone in the hallway. He reached into his pocket and pulled out his phone. He had 500 contacts, billions in assets, and the power to shape the skyline of New York. But as he scrolled through his contacts, he realized there wasn't a single person he wanted to call. He walked to the window and looked down. He saw the automatic doors of the hospital open. He saw Liam help Elena into a modest sedan. He saw them drive away, merging into the traffic, disappearing into the warm southern night. He pressed his forehead against the cold glass. The condensation wet his skin, mingling with the tears he finally allowed to fall. He had paid $50 million to be the poorest man in the world. 5 years later, the summer gala at the coast was the event. It wasn't a stuffy ballroom affair like the ones in the city, where socialites kissed and compared diamond carats. This was an evening of warm breezes, string lights strung between ancient oaks and genuine laughter. Elena stood on the balcony of the Glass House, the community art center and sanctuary for single mothers she had built from the ground up. She was no longer the pale, frightened woman who had fled a penthouse in the rain. At 33, she was resplendent. She wore a gown of deep emerald silk that caught the light of the setting sun. Her hair pinned back to reveal a face that had not just aged, but ripened into a stunning, confident beauty. "Mama, look," a 5-year-old boy with messy dark curls and bright, curious eyes tugged at her skirt. Jared, he was a miniature force of nature, possessing Dylan's sharp intellect, but Elena's kind heart. "I see it, Jared," Elena laughed, crouching down to wipe a smudge of chocolate frosting from his cheek. "Did you save a dance for me?" "No, I promised Daddy Liam first." Jared giggled, pointing toward the garden. Liam was there, lifting a tray of champagne flutes, looking handsome in a linen suit that fit his broad shoulders perfectly. He caught Elena's eye and winked, a secret, intimate gesture that still made her toes curl. They weren't just partners in raising Jared, they were partners in every sense of the word. He was her rock, her lover, and the man who had taught her that love wasn't about possession, but about presence. Elena stood up, smoothing her dress. She walked to the microphone as the crowd quieted. These were her people now, local fishermen, retired teachers, artists, and the women she had helped save with the fortune she had once despised. 5 years ago, Elena began, her voice carrying clear and strong over the crowd. I thought my life was over. I thought I had lost everything. But I learned that sometimes you have to burn down the old house to... The crowd cheered. Across the street, parked in the shadows of a magnolia tree, a black sedan sat with its engine idling. The window was rolled down just an inch. Dylan Sterling sat in the back seat. He had aged 10 years in the last 5. His empire had doubled in value. His face was on the cover of Forbes and Time, but his eyes were hollow caves. He watched the woman on the balcony. He saw the way she commanded the room, not with fear, but with grace. He saw the little boy, his boy, running into Liam's arms, laughing as Liam tossed him into the air. He saw a family, a complete, Impenetrable unit, sir. His driver asked softly. Do you want me to drive up to the entrance? Dylan's hand moved to the door handle. He could get out. He could walk in there. He could create a scene, demand rights, throw his weight around. But then he saw Elena look toward the street. For a second, he thought she saw him, but her gaze passed right over the dark car, indifferent and unbothered. She turned back to Liam, who wrapped an arm around her waist and kissed her temple. She wasn't hiding anymore. She just didn't care. He was no longer a monster to be feared. He was just a ghost she didn't believe in. Dylan pulled his hand back. The check in his mental ledger was finally balanced. He had paid $50 million to be free, and tonight, seeing her happiness, he realized the transaction was truly complete. She didn't need him. She never had. No, Dylan whispered, his voice cracking. Drive, take us to the airport. Back to the city, sir. Anywhere but here. The black car pulled away, slipping into the night unnoticed. On the balcony, Elena felt a sudden lightness, as if a final lingering thread had snapped. She raised her glass to the crowd, to the ocean, and to the stars above. To the future, she toasted. To the future. The crowd roared back. Elena drank the champagne. It tasted like victory. She looked down at Jared, who was dancing with a little girl near the band, and then at Liam, who was walking toward her with a smile that promised forever. She had walked through the fire, and she hadn't just survived. She had turned the ashes into gold. Let's have a frank discussion about the one who got away syndrome. Men like Dylan hold on to these romanticized ghosts because ghosts don't demand actual emotional maturity. They are safe fantasies. Sophia wasn't a prize. She was just a carefully preserved mirror reflecting his 20-something ego. He blew up a real functional partnership for a nostalgia trip. And nostalgia always comes with a brutal hangover. Elena's victory is absolute because she refused to be a placeholder or a victim. She didn't fight the ghost. She didn't negotiate her worth. She simply calculated the severance, secured her child's future, and let gravity handle Dylan's poor investments. Have you ever watched a man burn down a solid foundation to chase a ghost? How quickly did he realize the phantom had absolutely nothing to offer? The comments section is open. And as always, I am listening.